Why is Lisa failing terribly when she was supposed to win? Not just succeed, but win. Out of every Blackpink member going into the solo era, she was the one the entire internet had already decided would come out on top. She had more followers than anyone else in the group. She had the record that broke YouTube. She had the B-side that hit 1 billion streams. She was the name that non-K-pop people actually recognized when someone tried to explain what Blackpink was. And then she left YG, built her own company from scratch, signed one of the most artist-favorable deals a K-pop soloist has ever negotiated, dropped a 15-track album with Max Martin producing and half of Western pop's biggest names as features, performed at the Oscars, landed a White Lotus role, and headlined Coachella. She did all of that, and somehow Jennie's album got better reviews. Rosé had the bigger cultural moment, and Lisa, who by every measure was the most active and most visible of the four, generated the least amount of genuine artistic conversation. That gap between activity and impact is what this video is actually about, because nobody in her circle is saying the obvious thing out loud, and I think it is time someone did. But before we get into the alter ego numbers, the goals disaster, and the question about Frederic Arnault that the internet refuses to let go, we need to start somewhere earlier, because the story of why Lisa's solo era is underperforming begins with understanding exactly what she was before any of this started. Blackpink was never a group you watched for the choreography. That is just the truth. The routines were clean but not complex, polished but not demanding. You could watch most of their stages and track exactly where each member was going to be 30 seconds before they got there. Lisa was the exception that made that obvious. When she was on stage next to her members, you noticed it almost immediately. Not because she was louder or more dramatic about it, but because she moved with a level of physical specificity that the rest of the performance simply did not have. There is a version of dancing where someone completes the choreography correctly, and a version where someone inhabits it, and Lisa was always doing the second thing. You could tell she had been doing this since she was a kid in Thailand, learning to move before she had any reason to, except that she loved it. So naturally, the fandom spent years building a specific promise around her, that the moment she had full creative control, the world would finally see what she could actually do. Fan comments under every Blackpink performance for years read the same way. She is being held back, YG does not know what they have, just wait until she goes solo. And when the solo debut dropped in 2021 under YG, it backed all of that up. The Lalisa music video broke the YouTube record for most views in the first 24 hours for a solo artist. The album moved over 736,000 copies in its first week in South Korea, the first female soloist to ever reach that number there. And Money, which was just a B-side, found its way onto TikTok and never left, eventually becoming the first K-pop solo track to clear 1 billion Spotify streams. Here is the detail worth sitting with. Every single one of those records happened while she was still inside the system everyone said was limiting her. The label she needed to escape from produced the commercial peak of her entire career. That is not a small thing. That is actually the central tension of everything that comes after. At the end of 2023, Lisa walked away from YG's solo activities clause and built something from nothing. Loud, her own management company, launched in early 2024. RCA Records under Sony followed by April. Full master ownership, full creative say, her own staff, her own direction, her own timeline. She was 27 years old, running her own label. That is genuinely impressive and worth saying clearly before anything else. The creative vision she chose to execute with all of that freedom was immediately legible. She was going after the Western mainstream, completely and without compromise. Every song after leaving YG was fully in English. Every feature was a Western name. Every major stage was American. The Oscars, Victoria's Secret, the VMAs, the Global Citizen Festival, Coachella. One after another, each one a deliberate signal that she was not angling to be the biggest K-pop soloist. She was angling to be a global pop star, full stop. Then Alter Ego arrived in February 2025 as the centerpiece of that strategy. The album dropped one day before her Oscars performance, which was clearly coordinated. The rollout had been building for months, through Alter Ego concept reveals and a companion comic book. Every mechanism was in place. The numbers landed, and they told a complicated story. Alter Ego sold roughly 167,000 copies in its first week globally. To compare that directly to her debut under YG, which moved 736,000 copies in South Korea alone in the same window, is to understand the scale of the gap. Rockstar had a strong debut. New Woman with Rosalia got attention in certain circles, but nothing crossed into the mainstream the way Money did without any of this infrastructure behind it. No song became the thing people were playing outside the fandom. No moment from the album became the cultural reference point her team had clearly planned for. The critical reception said the same thing in sharper language. Pitchfork scored it a 5.2 and wrote that the album presents a picture of wealth and self-confidence without ever opening a window into the person creating it. The Guardian described it as overreaching in multiple directions without landing cleanly in any of them. And that is the specific failure worth naming. An album built around revealing different dimensions of who she is ended up being one of the least revealing things she has ever released. 13 years in the public eye, an alter ego somehow told us less about Lisa than a random fan cam from 2018. Before we get to the Arnaud conversation, and we will get there, I want to slow down on something that does not get said enough. Lisa stopped being a dancer. Not literally, she can still dance. But as a solo artist with no choreographer to answer to, no group format to fill, no label breathing down her neck about what the performance should look like, she has almost entirely moved away from the thing that made her argument for going solo in the first place. Think about what that promise actually was. Not, Lisa should go solo because she could have a great pop career. The promise was, Lisa should go solo because when she moves, something happens that does not happen anywhere else in this industry, and she needs a stage big enough to actually show that. That was the argument fans were making for years. That was the reason people cared so specifically about her solo debut. And then she got the biggest stages of her career, stages she chose herself with no one telling her what to do, and the dancing mostly did not come with her. Her 2026 Coachella appearance is the clearest recent example. The production was expensive, the visual concept was striking, the outfit was extraordinary, but the performance itself was largely Lisa walking the stage and delivering vocals that immediately sparked a fresh round of lip-syncing discussions online. The same conversation had already run after the VMAs appearance, after the Global Citizen Festival, after the Oscars. Each time it comes up, it does a little more damage, because she is specifically trying to earn credibility in a market where performing live is not optional. The Western mainstream does not treat live performance as a nice bonus. It is the baseline. Adele gets criticized if her vocal is slightly off. Beyoncé had to address the Super Bowl lip sync question directly because the audience cared that much. A K-pop artist trying to transition into that world does not get to quietly use a backing track and have nobody notice. So she is not dancing the way she used to. She is not delivering consistent live vocals. Her rap style, which worked inside the K-pop context, is landing as dated to the Western audience she is courting. And the question that nobody in her immediate circle seems to be asking out loud is this: if those three things are the things she came with, and none of them are landing, what is the new offer? Because right now, the answer appears to be the aesthetic, the fashion, the visual spectacle, and those are genuinely world-class. Lisa at a photo shoot or on a red carpet is a different category of presence from almost anyone else in her peer group. But fashion is not an artistic identity, it is packaging. And at some point, the audience starts asking what is inside. There is a conversation that has been following Lisa's entire post-YG career, and she has never once directly engaged with it, which is her right, but the silence means it just keeps growing. Lisa and Frederick Arnault, son of Bernard Arnault, who runs LVMH, the largest luxury goods company on earth. They have never confirmed or denied a relationship publicly, but they have appeared in photos together repeatedly since 2022. The sightings have continued, and Lisa released a song called Moonlit Floor with a lyric about a green-eyed French boy that the internet treated as confirmation enough. The reason this matters for a career conversation rather than just a personal one is the timeline. After those initial sightings in 2022, Lisa became a Louis Vuitton house ambassador, an LVMH brand. She performed at the 2025 Oscars, on a stage that by the Academy's own tradition is reserved for artists with nominated songs. Lisa had no nominated song. LVMH was a sponsoring partner of the ceremony. She was cast in The White Lotus Season 3, a production with LVMH investment connections, set in Thailand, playing a resort employee with about 9 minutes of screen time and no meaningful character arc to speak of. She signed with WME for an acting career that nobody who had followed her for a decade saw coming, which generated its own immediate wave of nepotism commentary. What the Arnault connection has actually done to Lisa's career, regardless of whether any specific door was open through it, is attach a question mark to everything. Every major moment in the last 2 years gets filtered through it. She cannot have a genuine achievement without a portion of the audience immediately wondering whether the achievement was earned or arranged. That is damaging in a way that is difficult to recover from without addressing it, because the achievements keep coming and the question mark keeps following them. In May 2026, Lisa, Anitta, and Rema released Goals, the official anthem for the 2026 FIFA World Cup. And what followed was probably the most concentrated and specific criticism of her entire solo career. The lyrics reference body image, buying out the club, physical appearance, nightlife, The criticism that came within hours of release was not about the production or the sonic direction. It was about the fact that a World Cup anthem, historically built around themes of unity, national pride, collective passion, and the specific electricity of the tournament, had been handed to an artist who turned in something that would fit more naturally on the soundtrack of a high-end fashion event. One comment that went viral within the day: a World Cup song is supposed to be about people from different cultures coming together through football, and she is singing about looking good and sticking her tongue out. People started pulling up Shakira's Waka Waka, the 2010 South Africa anthem, as the baseline comparison. That song understood the assignment so specifically that it is still played in stadiums 16 years later. Goals is being described in some corners as the worst World Cup anthem ever made. The artist, who could theoretically use the World Cup stage to reintroduce herself to the world with something that reminded everyone why she was special, chose to arrive with more of the same. And the internet, including a lot of football fans who already have limited patience for K-pop crossovers, noticed. I want to step back from the individual moments and say what all of them are pointing at together. Lisa has been everywhere for 2 years. She has been more publicly visible than arguably any K-pop soloist in history. The volume of activity is not the problem. The problem is that none of the activity has produced a clear answer to a basic question. What is Lisa, as a solo artist, actually about? Inside Blackpink, even with all the group's creative limitations, Lisa occupied a specific and unmistakable role. The moment a performance started, your eye went to her. Not because she was centered in the formation or given the most lines, but because something in the way she moved communicated a level of investment that the rest of the stage did not always match. That was her identity. It was clear and it was real, and audiences felt it. As a solo artist, that clarity is gone. She is being presented as a fashion entity, a pop vocalist, a rapper, an actress, an entertainer in the broadest possible sense. Each of those directions competes with the others, and none of them is strong enough on its own to anchor the whole thing. The result is that you can watch a Lisa performance, listen to a Lisa album, see a Lisa red carpet appearance, and still not be able to answer the question of what makes her specifically irreplaceable. What is the thing only she can do that nobody else is doing? The alter ego concept had real potential, but the version that arrived felt assigned rather than lived. The personas existed on paper, yet rarely felt connected to anything genuinely personal. And when an audience senses that gap, the concept stops being interesting. The deeper issue, and this is the uncomfortable one, is that the album did not need 15 tracks and the biggest feature list in K-pop history to succeed. It needed one song that told us something true about who Lisa actually is when nobody is designing her image for her. That song does not appear to exist on Alter Ego. And that absence is what critics kept circling around in different language. She has more creative freedom than she has ever had. She owns her own masters. She runs her own company. Nobody is telling her what to do. And the most revealing thing about the solo era so far is that when given total freedom, she has produced music that feels less personal than anything she released when someone else was making the decisions. None of what I just said is a permanent verdict. Lisa's residency at Caesars Palace in Las Vegas in November is a different kind of stage from anything she has played as a soloist. A residency format gives her room to build something with more intention than a single festival appearance or award show slot. If there is a version of this era where she reconnects with the thing that made people care in the first place, a residency is the environment where that could actually happen. Her second album will be the real test of everything. A debut album carries a certain amount of forgiveness built into the conversation. Alter Ego can be described as an artist who had enormous infrastructure and was still figuring out who she wanted to be inside her own creative freedom. That is a reasonable reading. A second album that makes the same choices under the same circumstances is a different conversation with a harder conclusion. What would actually change the trajectory is not more activity. It is one moment of genuine artistic clarity. One song or one performance where the audience watches and understands immediately what she is for and why nobody else could do it. That moment does not require the largest stage or the most expensive production. It requires deciding what the actual thing is and committing to it completely, which is the one thing the solo era has consistently avoided doing. Drop everything in the comments, like the video, and subscribe if you are new.